Alright, good day to you friends. Brother Rob with you here. So what I want to talk about in this video is two things that I find some Christians need to just relax about. And it's usually, I don't know, I understand some concern about this, but it's not stuff worth losing sleep over. And if this stuff concerns you too much, then you're probably too serious and take things way too literally. So, I'm going to talk about two things that I know some people think I'm a heretic for this, but whatever. First of all is translation. So, translation is not a perfect science. Now, when people say that translation is not a perfect science, am I saying that there's errors in the Bible? Yes and no. Now, I know that saying that there's errors in the Bible is probably going to be giving me branded a heretic, but bear with me, okay? So, give an example. My heritage is Dutch. I don't speak Dutch. I'm third generation Canadian, and my parents never taught me Dutch, nor did they know Dutch themselves. So, but there's a word in Dutch that it's pronounced. I don't know how the spelling, but it's pronounced gezellig. Now, closest English translation there is to the word gezellig is peaceful, tranquil. But if you ask anyone who knows Dutch that about this word, they'll tell you there's no perfect translation from Dutch to English. So what you do is you use the best synonym, which is peaceful, tranquil, those kind of things, to get the closest to the meaning that you can, right? Well, the Bible translators, when they're translating from Hebrew and Greek, are faced with the same challenge. There's not always a perfect word from translating from Greek and Hebrew to English. So what they do is they use the best word available at their disposal and go with that. Now, does that mean some meaning could be lost in some passages? Probably. But the textual issues in the Bible are very minimal and they don't change doctrine. So again, translation is not a perfect science, but I want to put you at ease that the majority of English translations that we have keep to the overall story. So the story has been preserved. There may be some textual, syntax, grammar issues to deal with. Actually, I'll give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about, okay? There's a story in the New Testament, very, very familiar, famous story, where Jesus asked Peter, "Peter, do you love me?" Now in English we have 3 times, "Peter, do you love me?" But in the Greek, the first 2 times, Jesus asked, "Peter, do you love me?" Agape, love, with love of God. And the 3rd time, Jesus asked him, "Peter, do you love me?" Phileo, which is friendship or brotherly love. Now in English, we just get love, love, love. But you see how the Greek changes the slight meaning. But here's the question: does that, now that you know this, does it change the doctrine of the entire span of Scripture? Does it mean it's erroneous? Well, no. I mean, first of all, that's a really minor thing. And Jesus did ask 3 times, Peter 3 times, if he loved him, just not the same type of love. So it's a minor textual issue that changes nothing in the overall story of the canon of Scripture. So I'm not bothered by it. If this bothers you, well, it is what it is. Second thing is late editions. So you have verses like 1 John 5:7. There are 3 who bear witness in heaven: the Father, the Word, and the Spirit, and these three are one. So this is an addition. So people say, well, does an addition mean it's an error? Well, that's not the same thing. So 1 John 5:7. I wish it was not an addition because it's the most concise verse in the entire Bible about the doctrine of the Trinity. So the question I ask is, does the addition contradict the teachings and doctrines of the rest of Scripture? 1 John 5:7 clearly doesn't. In fact, it aligns perfectly with Scripture. And again, I wish it was not an addition, because it is the most concise and succinct verse in the entire Bible for the doctrine of the Trinity. Another one that's been added is, this one is actually rather obvious. If you actually look at the text in Luke about the woman being caught in adultery and brought before Jesus so that the religious leaders could try to trap in his words, how they should proceed. The law of Moses, kill him. What do you say? And of course, we know this. And the story goes as Jesus said, if any of you is without sin, let him be the first cast stone. So he kept the law of Moses while upholding the law of mercy. There's Jesus for you. So, but again, you can see, if you actually look at, I don't know where it is exactly, and it's in Luke, but you can see that if you look before what's going on in that story and after what's going on in that story, you can see that it's kind of like it's like a puzzle piece out of place. You can see that very clearly if you actually look at the text. But again, although it's an addition, does it line up with the teaching and does it line up with the person and character of Jesus and doctrines of Scripture? Answer again, yes. I would try to explain this to a gentleman on Twitter earlier this week when I said, well, think about it this way. If we were to go on an archaeological find and we find some amazing artifacts, this ancient language, bones, so on, and we come back, let's say 5-10 years later, and we find something else that corroborates the first thing, does that mean that the first time around, like it's errors? Like, this is how I think about it, and so I think this analogy is helpful. So I don't think finding it later means it's wrong. It just means it's found later. It's an addition. So there's a difference between error and addition. They're not categorically the same. Now there are things that have, like for example, the Catholic Church has added 7 books, and the Book of Maccabees is obviously it should not be canon because it's just full of holes. But so the question, so my contention with you is, dear Christian brother or sister, don't be concerned with these things, unless of course you're reading a Catholic Bible, and you should be concerned because they've added 7 books. But if you're reading a regular book with 66 books of the Bible, most translations are pretty accurate to the keeping of the story in person, the original text, the best they could, and most keep to who the person of Jesus Christ is. One translation I will say is garbage is the NIV. And I make no apologies for that. I mean, you can get saved on the NIV. I mean, Lizzie, maybe I'll take her and just say, she, her handle here on Twitter is at @FarmingAJesus. She said she was saved in it. I was raised in the NIV, so I didn't know any better. I mean, the one thing going for the NIV, like it's in its similarity to the ESV, is that it's extremely readable and easier to understand. So, in terms of accessibility, reader, it's very user-friendly, if I can use the word, in its usage of the English language. But there's massive doctrinal issues with the NIV, and so I consider the NIV. It's maybe something you could start with, but you should move on quickly to other better versions of the Bible. My opinion, I prefer the NASB and the New King James Version, and it's usually a lot of the New King James onlyists that have issues with this stuff. Well, a lot of them are too hyperliteral, and I think it's for me, saying that the King James Version is the only trusted English version is as monumentally stupid and ignorant as the Catholic Church saying it's the only true church. And I'll just leave it at that. Peace out, Brother Rob.